Everybody's favourite trilogy has now come to an end. The Strangers marked out its third chapter of its rebooted trilogy recently, and with that we now have 5 entries into this franchise. Today we're going to be looking at all 5 of those films and ranking them from worst to best. So without further ado, let's get started. The third and final entry into this Strangers trilogy is here, thus ending one of the worst trilogies of all time. The Strangers Chapter 3 wraps up this trilogy in typical fashion by continuing to drag out this story at a very slow and dull pace. The unimaginative narrative once again proves that the decision to drag out this story into 3 parts was a pointless decision, as the lack of substance is apparent. Despite an 80-minute runtime, Chapter 3 features a lot of lingering facial shots and one-takes, which simply serve as padding to make sure that this film does reach its desired runtime, further proving the lack of ideas with this film. Where this concept did thrive in the past was through its lack of personal motivations for the killers, so naturally this film decides to dive deep into these characters and give them a backstory and development to justify their characteristics, and that just removes any tension and mystery that we've had in the past. For me, this final chapter is the worst of the bunch, and if you've seen the other films in this trilogy, you know what to expect.
Somewhere between your heart and mine.
Whenever a trilogy is pre-planned, the second entry often gets a bit of criticism for acting as filler, or the in-between of the start and the finish, purely just events with no real consequences, just serving to advance the plot basically. And I normally disagree with those criticisms in many cases because it's an important part of the story which can build character development, plot points, etc, etc. Here I completely get the criticism. It just feels as though this film is just things happening to pass the time so they can get to the end, as opposed to building out some interesting ideas and new ideas to explore. This is just 90 minutes of this lead character being chased around, and when it does run out of ideas, it just decides to drastically change genre and become a Revenant knockoff. Having a trilogy devoted to you as the main character, you'd expect the lead to gain some interesting development or some characteristics which make her, you know, memorable, but no, that's not the case here with Madeleine Petsch's character. She is very forgettable and so basic that I don't even know what her character's name is without having to look. As I mentioned, you follow her getting chased for 90 minutes and it's just a constant repeated cycle of her being chased, escaping, resting up, recovering from her injuries, and then repeating the same concept. I've never seen a better example of a middle film in a trilogy trying to stuff the runtime out than this one.
Trouble on my left, trouble on my right. I've been facing trouble almost all my life.
Well, would you look at that? The bottom 3 consist of this new trilogy, and I think that just speaks for itself. You know, there's no reason why this should have been a whole trilogy. Even one film felt a bit weird. Nonetheless, here we are with Strangers Chapter 1. Pre-planning a trilogy normally suggests that you have a great idea and the studio behind you has a lot of confidence in that idea, yet none of that is on show here. Chapter 1 is essentially a lesser remake of the cult classic original, playing out in an almost identical environment with just less tension and less interesting characters. If it isn't copying the original, Chapter 1 is ticking off the horror cliche checklist in absolute laughable fashion, becoming an extremely generic film into the genre. The bare minimum is done to develop these characters, with the 2 leads sharing no chemistry at all, as well as lacking a captivating thing about themselves. The writing is extremely messy for the 2, as well as the story, as the overall project just feels very pointless and ultimately started this trilogy. Whilst not being a memorable slasher at all, Prey at Night feels like such a huge upgrade over that trilogy, purely just by having some sort of substance to it. The intimate environment is removed, making for a different experience, both good and bad in areas. It allows for more depth to the actual story, as you get moments where the characters can escape and relax and recover from these situations, give you a break for quieter moments. One of the big ones being character development. There is this family at the center of this story who have a very troubled relationship, and seeing that realistic depiction thrown into this harsh scenario, it just felt like there was some sort of realism to it, at least more interesting than in the previous entries. With slasher films, you tend to tune in for the intense kill sequences, and while the actual kills themselves aren't anything too memorable, the way they are shot is what catches your eye. The cinematography and lighting is a standout in this film and elevates every scene they occur in. Overall, this is still quite an average slasher film, but it's nice to see a few moments of quality sprinkled about.
I turned 21 in prison doing life without parole.
Like with most franchises, the original tops the list, and to be honest, it's not a film that I massively like all that much. I do get the appeal, but it's not one I enjoy as much as other people do. I think a solid job is crafting a tense and intimate environment for these occurrences to play out. The story is extremely simple, yet sometimes that's all you need, as it focuses on the claustrophobic scenario that is occurring, and to be honest, not much else. The Strangers does what it needs to and executes the general premise. However, I felt like there could have been a little bit more weight to the characters and just maybe a bit more to the story. That premise is simple and executed well, and the lack of motivation for the antagonist is chilling and does implement an unsettling vibe. Yeah, I did find myself wanting more from this story. However, as you can tell, it is still enough to earn itself a top spot in my ranking. That is my ranking of all 5 films in the Strangers franchise, featuring that unnecessary trilogy as well. I doubt we'll be seeing any more films in this franchise for a very long time, as there is a lot of negativity surrounding this trilogy. Even past that, I just don't think this is a property which needed to become a franchise. I think the first film works perfectly well on its own. Pray at Night switches it up a little bit, but I don't think justifies needing to be a sequel, and yeah, you heard all my complaints about that trilogy. Regardless, I'd like to hear what your ranking is down below, and while you are there, if you could like and subscribe as well, that'd be great. I am doing more content over on TikTok as well as my YouTube shorts, so if you could chuck a follow on there if you're interested, that would be superb. Anyways, thank you so much for watching today, and I hope to see you in my next video.